living in the United States, I started my day at 2:35 in the morning to attend a course that ran from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. in Central European Time. In the end, this was one of the most beautiful and inspirational learning experiences that I have ever had. In this video, I wanted to share a little bit more about what motivated me to follow the course and also what my learning experience was like. I remember that it was on my first day of my Dutch learning course that the instructor asked me why I was taking the course if I lived in Florida. My response at the time was that I wanted to visit Belgium, but in an attempt to speak in the target language, my response was understood as I had not visited Belgium yet, and later I cleared up this miscommunication. And then a few months later, a friend who lives in Belgium asked me, "What made you decide to take this course?" And at that time, my answer was a bit more clarified, and I responded that it was my desire to understand. I do not feel that either one of these responses is complete. Instead, I believe it was a combination of motivators that led me to ultimately remain enrolled in the course and finish it until the end. One of my motivators was my intense desire to understand the live conversations between people, to understand media. I have this feeling that I really, really wish I could understand, and it's such a deep motivator for me. There's this deep desire and curiosity to unlock the meaning behind words, the unfamiliar words. Now, of course, you could say, well, there are translators. One doesn't have to know every single language to get a pretty good idea of what is being communicated. And while there are movie subtitles and content that is translated into different languages via the subtitles or even the audio, I feel that there is so much lost in translation. I strongly believe that in a translation, there are compromises, and there are even intentional misrepresentations of the original expression. I have a little list here of experiences of when I used Dutch in Belgium, and one of them is when I visited Brugge and I wanted to buy some fruits from a shop. But then when I went to pay, I realized that I actually had forgotten my money. And so I was searching, but then I really came to a point where it's like, my money is not here. I left it at where I was staying. And so I told him, ik heb geen geld, ik heb mijn geld vergeten. And essentially the transaction ended. I apologized and I walked out of the shop. This is day 6 of my morning Dutch course. In the morning, we started with chapter 2 material, and then we had our first test on chapter 1. I felt it was pretty easy. What I'm doing, switching my time zone, my schedule, it kind of just goes to show that if I really want to do something, I will do it and I can do it. For example, taking a Dutch exam in the morning, like at what's considered here to be, about 4:15 in the morning. It was about 10:15 over there in Europe. So it's possible. And it's also possible for me to wake up this early, to function, to ask questions, to show up, to read and process. Now, the darkening of my room has really helped my sleep. Today I feel a bit more tired than yesterday, but that's only because I stayed up a bit too late last night. Another experience that I had in applying Dutch was at a bookstore in a museum in Antwerp. And there, the first time I visited, I asked for the name of the music playing because I really liked it, and I was like, if I don't ask now, I'm gonna always wonder what that was, and the moment's going to be gone, and once I'm across the ocean, just it's not going to be as easy to ask. So I approached the shopkeeper, a friendly old gentleman, and I asked for the name of the song. Now, in my hesitance, in my cadence that was quite hesitant, he first thought that I was asking for the name of that place, of the museum. But then I clarified and I tried again, and I said no, but what is the name of the song? And this was all in Dutch. And he said, oh, and he was like, okay. And then he turned around the little tablet screen, and then I took a picture of the song, and yeah, and then that was it. Today being a Thursday meant that we had no class, although there was homework. So it was basically like the individual work sessions that we do within the class time, just without the instructor and without the other students. Today I studied the homework, or did the homework, which was about telling time. There was also a writing assignment that was from 2 lessons ago, and there were, vocabulary and other smaller things. A lot of exercises in the workbook. I find myself doing a lot of the Anki flashcards while I am walking, back and forth, maybe, to my car or from my car. But right now, my thoughts are pretty much filled with this Dutch course. I find myself thinking about it. I find myself just feeling a lot of positivity towards it. It's become my new focus. Sometimes I also think about, of course, filmmaking and video editing, but this course right now is taking, I'm dedicating a lot of time to it. I'm putting it as my priority number 1 for my days. In the mornings, at lunch, and in free moments that I have, I'm going through the notes, going through Anki, going through the homework, the website, reviewing the feedback that I have received on my assignments and everything. Now it's day 7 of my morning Dutch course, and I have to say I really appreciate the schedule of the 4 days, with a 1-day break in between, and then 2 days weekend before another cycle of 3 days in a row starts again. I think one thing that I really need to work on is confidence in speaking Dutch. Another experience that I had in Belgium was when I visited Ghent, and there, after a full morning and the beginnings of an afternoon of just traveling and visiting the city, I was quite thirsty, and I hadn't brought any water. So after I had visited this castle, I went into one of the small cafes that's in the city center, and I asked if they had water, they had water to sell, bottled water or something. But unfortunately, they didn't sell water like that. So then the lady said that she would just give me some tap water. And, I accepted. She brought out the glass, and then I asked, hoeveel kost het? And she just, she just gave it to me for free. She's like, no, just take it. In that scenario, it's not only the language that gives me satisfaction, it's also this satisfaction in the interactions with people that I got to have. It's this happiness, but it's also this realization, perhaps, that interactions with humans can be so short and so simple, but yet so beautiful if I choose to look at them that way. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that when I go into Belgium and I don't immediately start speaking English, first, it gives me some comfort in that I'm not immediately showing myself to be a rude, arrogant tourist. And it also gives me kind of satisfaction that's because I don't immediately demand that they speak English, I can have an interaction in the language that they feel most comfortable in, and therefore, perhaps, I have a better interaction with them. Now, because of my level of Dutch, sometimes I would feel quite uncomfortable in saying more. Like, first of all, I didn't know how, and I didn't have the confidence in how, and so I would just nod my head and be polite, and I got around with this to a fair degree, I would say. Today is day 20 of my morning Dutch course. I have finished the exam or the test for chapters 1 through 5. I'm in the last week of classes, and so next week at this time I will have been finished with my speaking exam. I'm also approaching the deadline when I have to decide whether to take the level 2 or not. I'm thinking I might not be taking it just because I'm trying to prioritize the time I have to work on other projects that I have going on, but I definitely do want to follow level 2 maybe a little bit later in this year. Another wonderful experience that I got to have was requesting fruits at a local farmer's market in Antwerp, and I did this twice. The first time I did it, I had to look at my dictionary quite a bit to prepare myself before entering the transaction. So there was these little fruits. They're gooseberries, but in Dutch you say stekelbes. And so I didn't know the word for this at first, so I had to look it up. And then also strawberries, aardbeien. And so I just looked up these words before I entered the transaction. So then when I was at the stand and it was my turn, then I could actually just say what I wanted and not struggle to put together the words. So this was quite satisfying because again, there was this immediate feedback in that if I pronounced the words correctly, I wouldn't be asked to repeat them, but then I would also immediately just receive the goods that I was asking for. And then I did this a second time, and it was also quite satisfying. And so I bought so many pastries and fruits and just little things, and I feel that it was not so much to get the thing, yes, the pastry was nice and everything, but it was more just to practice my language, to experience the reaction of people in response to my efforts in asking for the thing. Today is a Saturday, and yesterday was the final lesson. It went well. We did many breakout rooms to practice our speaking, and we did a little bit of individual work as well, just a very small amount, and it was very light. We didn't really go into deep grammar rules or anything for the last lesson because we had already finished most of what we had to do. So yesterday was mainly interactive, a lot of speaking exercises. Now the lessons are over, now the exams begin, and then at this point tomorrow I'm going to, I think, be studying with maybe a couple of people, so we'll see how that goes. It should be interesting. And then it's the speaking exam on Monday. My 10 minutes are at 10:30 in the morning in Belgium time, and then the day after that is the writing exam, the reading and the listening, which is going to take up the duration of what our lessons used to be. And then on Thursday we're going to receive the exam feedback, and then it's going to be all over, all done. And I have decided not to take the next level at this moment because I have other projects that I'm doing. There is another experience of me speaking Dutch in Belgium, and this time was when I was waiting for a train from Hasselt to Antwerp. And this was in the evening, and it was actually the last train before the next trains were going to run. It was the last train to Antwerp, I made some rough notes of this interaction when I was in the moment, and I'm not sure if I missed to type something. There are some typos here, but it will give an idea, perhaps. At Hasselt train station, a lady lost her SIM card signal on her phone and was asking me for help. I said, "Ik heb geen wifi." She accepted that, saying something like, "You have the same problem." Then she said something about not wanting to ask the remainder of the people, I think. Having a little bit more courage, I ventured to say something further. I said, "Ik heb de laatste trein aan Antwerpen." And then she said, "Ik ook." A pause. "Dankjewel." I replied, "Ja," instead of "graag gedaan." Now, being as sensitive to errors as I am, this particular one shows me that although the correct vocabulary and correct grammar rules are critical, the language learning process is not all about that. It is actually an experiment and process of learning to express myself differently. Because it is clear from this lady's response that she understood, she grasped the meaning that I was trying to communicate. And this tells me that if I make a sincere effort to use the language correctly and apply the rules that I have learned, and I still make mistakes, and yet if the other party understands my intent, then in some ways my goal has been achieved. And that goal is to be understood. The effect of good pronunciation goes a long way in being able to practice my language learning skills in the country that the target language is spoken, meaning that when I have good pronunciation, I interact with the native speakers in a way that, one, if I do it well enough, they might not even be able to tell in the short interaction that we have that I am actually not a native speaker, or I can have such a reasonable level of pronunciation that they find it unnecessary to switch to English, which is, I think, the ultimate goal when I go and essentially practice my language skills in everyday situations. What I do to become more familiar with the language and what I do to help me pronounce the words better is to listen to podcasts in Dutch or whichever target language I'm learning. The way I did this was to type a English word of interest into Google Translate and then paste the Dutch word into Spotify. And through searching and listening to different ones, just essentially browsing, I found a few Dutch podcasts that I regularly turn on. And what I aim for when I search for podcasts is excellent audio quality. Because when the audio is professionally recorded, the result is not only, very understandable to hear, but it's also nice to hear it. And it increases my enjoyment of listening to the language. There was a lady in my Dutch course who asked if pronunciation was important for the speaking exam. And the instructor replied with something along the lines of, "It is not a pronunciation exam, but if the instructor testing you cannot understand what you're saying, that is going to lower your mark. So they need to be able to understand you." So in this way, I think this is a perfect way to express the importance of pronunciation. In the end, it's really about the message that I'm trying to get across, but a central part of getting that message communicated is good pronunciation.